What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer of BamaOnLine.com, joined again by Blake Byler. And Blake, man, it's technically football season this week. It's week 0. I know Alabama's still got a week and a half-ish to go until its game, but we have college football on this weekend. That's exciting. But we're here to talk about Alabama's second scrimmage. They went 105 plays at Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday,
that's right.
August 16th. Hot one, and I think that was by design, not necessarily Kalen DeBoer controlling the weather, but controlling what time they started the scrimmage. It was the latest practice day of fall camp. Most of these started like 9:20-ish, 9:30. I think the last scrimmage was well before noon, but this one kicked off at 1 o'clock, and I think that was to get them ready for that heat in Tallahassee. And, of course, we weren't out there because the media is not allowed to watch any of it even. But we heard from Kalen DeBoer after. We heard from some people who were in attendance. So we're going to kind of talk about the scrimmage a little bit. And, of course, even though Ty Simpson's been named the starter, and I know Tim and I did a show on that last week, kind of start with the quarterbacks. And with Ty, hearing from some people I trust, it sounded like he had a really, really good day. I know he had 2 touchdowns, one on the ground, one through the air. The one through the air was to Ryan Williams. He would have had another touchdown had Cole Adams been able to haul it in, but we'll get to the drops in a little bit. But Ty looked good. All 3 quarterbacks, from what I heard, had strong days. They didn't turn the football over, which has been a theme throughout fall camp. Austin Mack had a nice touchdown pass to Jalen Hale, which is something you love to hear because a guy like Jalen Hale and even Deontay Lawson making plays out there, given their injuries from last year. That's big news for Alabama. And then Keelan Russell did some nice things with his legs, and that's something both he and Ty Simpson did in that second scrimmage. And so when you see the feedback, you hear from Kalen DeBoer, just what did you think about the way the quarterbacks played in this final scrimmage?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been all good things, but it's really been kind of consistent with what we've been hearing throughout fall camp. I feel like the entire quarterback room has just done a really nice job kind of in totality. Ty Simpson has been the leader with that, and we know that because it's been almost a week now since he was named the starting quarterback. And he just continues to be consistent and to have command of the offense, like that word that we've been hearing paired with him kind of the entire offseason and into the fall. He's been quick and decisive from what we've heard with his decision-making, which is really important. Kalen DeBoer loves to say he throws a catchable ball. And, like the quarterback room as a whole, not just him, has done a good job with Austin Mack and Keelan Russell. Like they both had good camps from everything we've heard. They've both done a really good job and flashed potential. Austin Mack is, kind of getting to the point where he's starting to come into his own as a player, even though he's still pretty young. And he was a reclassified guy out of high school. So he's in his 3rd year of college, but he's really, I think, only 19 or 20 years old. He's a young guy. And then obviously Keelan Russell being fresh out of high school, the talent is flashing with him as well. And so you really have a good quarterback room that's done a lot of nice things. Cutting down on turnovers is huge. Back and listening to Ryan Grubb last week, he said that the whole room only had 4 picks as of last Tuesday through fall camp, and he said at that point in the spring they'd had 15. So that's a really huge improvement on taking care of the ball, and really just as a whole, it's been more of kind of the same. There haven't been a ton of huge developments with this quarterback room outside of Simpson being named the starter, but it's been good, consistent play really from all 3 of them as we're now entering the last week of fall camp.
I think that Ty hasn't taken a lot of risks, and that might worry some people, but he feels good about his tight ends and running backs where if nothing's there, he's not forcing the ball down the field into double coverage to where Alabama does have these really good defensive backs and potentially, losing the football for his offense. He's checking it down some. And one source that I trust when it comes to Ty Simpson said he was 14 of 15 for 150 yards. And I mentioned that drop earlier. So he was damn near perfect in the scrimmage. And I do think we'll see him, grow. I don't want to say grow more confidence, but in a game, he has his receivers, he has his guys, he's going to trust them in those situations. And I also think though, it says a lot about these quarterbacks that they're not making mistakes against, like I said, a really good secondary.
Really good defense.
Yeah. I know Mo Linguist shared a photo of those DBs after the second scrimmage, and it's a good looking group. And I think that kind of leads us perfectly into what we're going to talk about next, is some of the standouts. And it was like one of the first things I mentioned in the nuggets I posted on the BO roundtable, but Dijon Lee was a name that I heard before the scrimmage even ended. So I just got a text message that just said Dijon Lee. That was the first thing it said. And I was like, oh. And the thing is, like, I had heard earlier in the week that Lee was getting some first team reps. And two things came into my mind when I heard that. One, we know Damani Jackson had an injury in the spring. He's talked about being 100% healthy, but you kind of take things a little easy with him. But I also think Dijon Lee might be too good to keep off the field. I think he's actually competing for that position. I don't know if it's necessarily the same situation you have with a Jaden Roberts and a Geno Vandermark. One, Jaden's been dealing with a concussion, but Damani's a much more consistent player than Jaden Roberts. And so it's just the difference in depth for this secondary compared to a year ago after Nick Saban retired is insane. And Dijon Lee at 6'4", 202, he stands out just standing around, but then when he gets on the field, he's continuing to do that. I know he had a nice PBU in the red zone late in the scrimmage. So he's a guy that I think both of us are excited to watch this fall. We'll be at practice on Tuesday for a little bit, so just seeing maybe where he fits into things. But given what we heard in the spring, what we've heard in fall camp, whenever you hear that Dijon Lee had a good scrimmage, what kind of comes to mind for you?
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily surprising, knowing the talent that he has, being a 5-star coming out of high school, and just the size and the frame that he has. Like, it's eye-popping because you see him out there with the corners, and Alabama has good corners, but most of the room isn't huge or anything. And Dijon Lee's standing there at 6'4". Like you said, he just really stands out physically among the rest of those guys. But then the more and more we hear about him, it sounds like he's one of those recruits that comes in day one is just ready to go. And he has the talent and the mental aspect, the understanding of how the game works, and being able to go out there and, put himself in a position to where he has to make the coaches find a way to get him on the field. It sounds like they're doing that. And like you said, the depth at corner is just night and day compared to last season. And last year when Saban retired, the whole corner room got gutted. And then you have Damani Jackson coming in from USC. You have a 5-star in Xavier Brown, who have turned out to be really good players. But a year ago, they had taken 0 snaps in an Alabama uniform. And then behind them, I think your number 3 corner was Jalen Mbakwe, another true freshman who's since swapped over to wide receiver. But still, at corner now, you have 2 returning starters. You have a true freshman. And whenever your true freshman is in a position where he's so good that you can't keep him off the field versus you have to play him because you have nobody else, whether he's a good player or not, having him coming off the bench as a reserve and a guy you can rotate in is huge. Like, that just adds so much to your depth. You can keep guys fresh, especially a guy who was coming off an injury in Damani Jackson. Like, that's good to be able to rest him a little bit. But then even behind him, you have Chuck McDonald, who's a talented freshman. You have Cam Calhoun, who might spend some time at corner, might spend some time at Husky. Red Morgan, who played legitimate snaps last year, is now swapped to corner. The depth is crazy compared to what it was last year, and Dijon Lee's a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, like, the depth, I think we probably can't talk enough about it. To steal a line from Tim Watts, I know it's one of his favorite phrases on the show, but like, one thing that we probably don't mention enough is Xavier Brown. Like, we're talking about Damani Jackson going to his senior year. He's the one that's rotating with a true freshman. Xavier Brown is someone that they trust a lot. And I know I wrote about him last week. I asked Kane Womack about him, mainly because I knew he was standing behind us ready to be interviewed to get a supporting quote from the DC. But Kane's a guy that a lot of times this offseason, whether it's in the spring or fall camp, when he's talked about like young guys kind of making the next step and the reasons behind it, he's used Xavier Brown as an example because he's a guy that came in as a true freshman.
Yep.
And he didn't act like a true freshman. He didn't make the same mistake twice. And that's why we saw him. Yes, he started every game last year, but earlier in the year, they were rotating guys. You had Jalen Mbakwe, like you said. Zay Mincy started out as corner.
Yep.
Even Deshaun Jones with the 1. So he's a guy that got better and better and more comfortable, and then he just didn't come off the field. And so I don't know if that's necessarily a trajectory for Dijon Lee, but you got to be excited about the young guys in that room. You also got to be excited about 2026. I know we're not even got to the 2025 season, but thinking about a starting cornerback duo of Xavier Brown and Dijon Lee, and then you have Jordan Edmonds coming in too. Like the way that they have just kind of restocked this cornerback room is pretty remarkable. And even like the group they brought in this year, you have Lee, you have Chuck McDonald, Cam Calhoun over from Utah, which I'm still fascinated to see where he plays out in this defense. But then Ivan Taylor, the true freshman safety, he's the only newcomer in that safety room. He had a good scrimmage. He was someone that was mentioned multiple times to me just afterwards from people that were watching. So I think the youth and the depth of this secondary is in just a completely different spot than last year. It's kind of like the wide receiver group. It's a 180. And one group, though, like that, it's kind of tough to gauge in a scrimmage is the pass rush because the quarterbacks are wearing those black no contact jerseys. You can't hit them.
Yep.
I mean, you can, but then, bad things are going to happen to you. You're probably going to get your ass chewed out and be on the sideline. But Noah Carter is a guy that we've kind of heard from steadily, consistently throughout preseason camp. Sounds like he was able to get home a couple times on scrimmage sacks, but still, we've heard good things about the offensive line, the offensive tackles in particular. But for Noah Carter to be a guy generating some buzz, I think is big because you have Quay Rousseau coming back. You have Jamarian Latham going into his 6th year, but Yanze Pierre's had a good preseason. We hear a lot of good things about Justin Hill, but I think people forget about Noah Carter sometimes. So I know we've talked about him, we've wrote about him, but what do you think of the depth of that inside or outside linebacker position?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that we keep hearing about Noah Carter is huge because, like you said, he kind of felt like, the forgotten guy in that room going into the season. You have Quay Rousseau as a returning starter who had a pretty good year last year when he wasn't hurt. And then Yanze Pierre is a guy who we've also heard a decent bit about and who seems like he's had a pretty good camp as well. And he's like a former 5-star recruit going into his 3rd year. So he's a guy that a lot of people that follow the program, follow the team, kind of know the name of. And it's like, okay, it's about time to start hearing about Yanze Pierre. Jamarian Latham's a vet. You kind of know what you're getting with him. And then Justin Hill's like the flashy 5-star newcomer. And that kind of leaves Noah Carter out as a guy who, redshirted last year. He's going into his 2nd year. Wasn't the highest ranked recruit, but I think he was still top 100, like still a good recruit. Absolutely. And so he's just a guy that we hadn't heard a lot about going into the year, but now this fall camp, his name keeps coming up. And I think that's huge for the depth of this room. And, we keep talking about depth seemingly everywhere. And I feel like that's a word that really just keeps being used with this Alabama team. And that's huge because depth is really hard to come by in college football. And the fact that Alabama seems to have depth at so many places, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is huge. But, that really, with a Wolf position where usually only one guy in that room is on the field at one time, that really lets you keep a fresh rotation of guys in the game. Yeah. And so as the game wears on, you're playing in a physical SEC, opponents trying to lean on you with the run game or whatever it is, you're going to have fresh bodies, it seems like, at Wolf that they can trust to be in the game. And also, like you said, even with corners, looking ahead to the future, to 2026 and beyond, like Noah Carter's a young guy. And if he's sticking out now in preseason camp going into his 2nd year, his redshirt freshman year, that just gets me even more excited about him in the future as he continues to develop and, guys graduate, move on. You never know how the room's going to shake out. He's a guy that could continue to step up as we move on into the future.
Alabama's going to lean on Quay Rousseau and LT Overton on those 2 like edge roles, but I'm really intrigued to see the guys behind them. We already talked about those Wolf outside backers, but then Jordan Renaud, Keon Keeley, Cavante Henry, Kelby Collins, wherever he's at, inside, outside. Like they have a lot of interesting options, I think, off the edge. And when you're talking about defense, looking to get more pressure on the quarterback this fall in terms of finishing and pulling them down for sacks, they've got the dudes that could do it. I'm interested to see if they will do it. But, pass rush, if a guy's having a good day, you got to wonder about the offensive line. I think the offensive tackles had a pretty strong day. That was something I wrote about this morning in our kind of stock report from the first 15 days of fall camp. It's crazy. Alabama's had 30 practices so far when you go back to spring practice. So
yeah, that's crazy.
A lot of ball. Game day will be here before you know it. But it wasn't all great from the scrimmage. And I think I don't want to say people want to hear that, but I think at this point, like they're the realists on our board that don't want to hear sunshine pumping all the time. And there was some not so good in the scrimmage. We kind of alluded to it a little earlier, but there were some drops. I think the quarterbacks could have had a really good day, and people would have came out of that feeling good about all three. I think they did, but like their completion percentage just frankly wasn't what it should have been because there were drops. I think Cole Adams had a few. He had the one on the would-be touchdown from Ty Simpson I mentioned earlier. Jalen Hale had a few, even though he had a wide-open touchdown catch from Austin Mack. So I think that's something that you want to clean up, and it's something that it hasn't been I mentioned the drops from Saturday, but that hasn't been something we've heard about throughout fall camp. It's almost like an anomaly from the second scrimmage. So we'll see if it persists. But like if you're a wide receiver in that group and you're dropping the football, you better be looking over your shoulder because there's some guys that are going to be
There's other
to
guys
get on
there.
the field. Like, that's a loaded room. And look, Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton had good scrimmage days. The top three guys that are going to play a ton have been consistent. They've been really damn good. But the guys kind of battling for those other spots, they got to continue to battle. And then I know you wrote about it after the scrimmage, the place kicking, probably something people don't want to hear about. There were some misses. I do know that Connor Talty hit a 48-yarder, but he had a few misses. And I know he talked about the punting a little bit too. Kalen DeBoer seemed more pleased with those performances, especially from a Blake Dowd. But what were your takeaways from a specialist standpoint? Because we heard a little bit about kicking and punting on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just taking what DeBoer says at face value, it kind of sounds like Blake Dowd's going to be the punter. And that makes sense, too, because he's the experienced guy. I think eligibility-wise, I think he's a redshirt senior. And so he's got experience. He's played for multiple years. And Alex Asparuhov's coming off the injury and is a freshman. So not really shocking that Blake Dowd is probably going to be the punter. From the kicking side, we know it's going to be Connor Talty. But what we don't know is how consistent he's going to be. And I think it's interesting that, DeBoer said that he's had a pretty good camp and that he's kicked well over at the practice fields. But then coming over into the stadium, he's missed a couple. And I think he said he missed a couple in the first scrimmage as well. And I might be misremembering, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of think that was a similar problem that Graham Nicholson had a year ago, where he was hitting in practice, wasn't hitting in Bryant-Denny for scrimmages and didn't have the best percentage a year ago. So it's interesting. I think Talty is capable, and we know DeBoer said he's gotten a lot better going into his second year with DeBoer, his third year in the program. But it sounds like that kicking's not going to be the strength that it was with Will Reichard. And I think we kind of know and expect that at this point because Reichard is one of the best kickers the program has seen, really. Hopefully it's not as shaky as the couple of guys right before Reichard, but hopefully he's consistent enough to, like you said, nail a 48-yarder. That's good. Just got to have the consistency.
Yeah, and like it's tough to compare anybody to Will Reichard because, like
right.
you said, I think Will's the best kicker in school history. But maybe they won't have to kick that many field goals. Maybe he just has to stick to extra points and kickoffs. And we saw he did a nice job with kickoffs last year. I will say, like, if I was Kalen DeBoer, I would just, because we've talked about when we're out at practice, we don't really see much from the kickers. It's a few periods that they go out there and kind of do their thing. They're working off the side. They're doing stuff. But I would just put them all in
let
a
them
bus
kick at the stadium.
Send them over to Bryant-Denny. Just like I know that's actually something that when talking to Kalen DeBoer last year for several stories for either for us or the game program, just talking kind of off the cuff about special teams. That's something he did at Washington. They practiced at their stadium a lot, and that's something that maybe he's had to adjust to. It's something that probably you mentioned Graham Nicholson coming over from Miami of Ohio. He's probably used to kicking in his stadium a lot. Connor Talty, though, is used to these practice fields and then going into Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturdays or, for a handful of scrimmages throughout the offseason. So you just wonder with him, and he's talked about like the mental side of things, really working on that being very important. You hope these misses don't, affect that at all. And look, right now we'll do a little bit of a bad news, good news, bad news sandwich because I got a little ad read for you guys from our friends over at Roback. So it's a situation where I know Andrew Bone talked about this on the message board, and a lot of people like Roback gear. If you do, we have 20% off kind of code for you. So just use the code BAMA20 on roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. And that's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code BAMA20. I know you and I like their hoodies, their polos. It's football season, so what better time to stock up than now?
They got good stuff.
Yeah, so big fan of Roback. Appreciate them sponsoring the podcast. But going back to the bad news a little bit, later on Saturday, I know we posted about it on the message board. People started to ask about it because it started to get out a little bit. But Jam Miller sustained an injury late in the scrimmage. Alabama's labeling it as an upper body injury. I know some people have said it's a collarbone, but we'll go with the official kind of vague statement at this point. We do know that he did undergo a procedure on Saturday. You never really want to hear that, but it sounds like they figured it out kind of quickly, but a little later. I think maybe they didn't anticipate it being as big of a deal as it was after the scrimmage. That's why we didn't hear about it from DeBoer in his post-scrimmage press conference. But the word got out a little bit on Saturday night. We kind of mentioned it first on the BOL roundtable, and then early Sunday morning, Kalen DeBoer put out that statement and talked about how it happened. He had the procedure, and then he didn't really release a timetable. We've seen from multiple reports, we've kind of heard a little bit of our own that maybe you're looking at 4-week range. That's not ideal to lose your starting running back and a guy that's had a killer preseason camp for that long. But you look at the schedule, how it sets up. You're a week away from the season opener. Alabama's going to play 4 games and then have a bye week. So it's a situation where, is it 4 games in a bye week or is it 3 games in a bye week?
3 games in a bye week.
Okay. Yeah, whatever. Time is irrelevant to me. But then you got the road game at Georgia. So you definitely want to have Jim Miller ready for that because that's going to be an all-out war. But I think, you don't want to undermine Florida State or Wisconsin. Sorry, ULM, but you don't want to undermine those other 2 teams at all. But it's almost that would be great for Jim if he can get back for that Georgia game. Give him time to heal, to recover. And again, we'll see. Alabama hasn't said anything about a time frame, at least from a public standpoint. We'll hear from Ryan Grubb later this week. We'll hear from Kalen DeBoer on Thursday. Maybe they have a different time frame, a different outlook on it, but we'll see. But just when you saw the news, what were your initial reactions? Because we'll talk a little bit more about who steps in for Jam, but it does suck because it sounds like Jam's had a really good preseason.
I think that's the first thing I thought of was just that sucks for Jam because he seemed to be in line for a massive year.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that he's been talked about during fall camp, a couple weeks ago, Ryan Grubb got asked about the running backs and he said Jam Miller and then paused before he went into anything else. It seems like Jam has just been wowing everybody in the program. And that's really cool for a guy who is going into his senior year and looks to be ready to have, I don't know if you could call it a breakout year because he was a starter last year, but a really big season for his last year on campus. And so to see that that's going to be shorter than maybe it could have been is unfortunate. And I hate that for him because I'm sure he's a guy that's just ready to be out there too. I mean, we talked to him in interviews last week and he was just kind of giddy and excited and just smiling the whole time, just seeming like he was ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate that for him. And also it is a blow to the offense because you're losing your best running back and the guy who seems like he's had the best camp, who has been talked about as having the best camp, your best runner, one of your most powerful runners. So that definitely hurts. But I'm sure we're about to get into, there are going to be other options to fill in for him. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's the end of the season. I don't think it's the end of the Florida State game, the fact that he's not going to be available, and we can get into that.
Yeah, for Jam, one, he's been happy when he's come up for interviews. I love that. Admittedly, I know a lot of these guys don't love to come up and talk to us when they do, but Jam's had a smile on his face. He's been in, I don't want to say in a better mood, but he's been more comfortable doing it. I think he put in a lot of work this offseason. Hearing from Dave Ballou, Jam is pound for pound one of the strongest players in this team, like you mentioned. And it's just when you think running back at Alabama right now, it's Jam Miller and then everybody else. And that's not necessarily a knock on the other backs. It's more so the work that Jam Miller's put in and the season he was getting ready to have. And look, it can be a blessing for Alabama because you get some of these young guys experience early, and then later in the season, you just have a full stable of backs that are confident, comfortable, and ready to roll. But you never want to lose your number one guy before the season even starts. And again, it's not a season-ending injury. He'll be back at some point. We just don't know when that'll be exactly yet. But like you mentioned, it creates opportunities for other guys. And look, they have 6 scholarship running backs, now down to 5, at least from an availability standpoint. You have Richard Young, Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley back. They added Dre Washington from Louisiana. They added A.K. Deere, a top 100 recruit from last year's cycle. They're not going to play all 5 of those dudes. I think, even hearing from Ryan Grubb, they've talked about 3 guys getting significant carries or considerable carries in terms of just game reps. And I think when we were looking at beyond Jam Miller, we were wondering who was going to be the odd man out between Daniel Hill, Richard Young, and Dre Washington. Well, now you got 3 spots for 3 guys. And so I'm really fascinated to see kind of the pecking order that's going to be out there, because we've seen a lot from Daniel Hill being right behind Jim Miller in some of these drills. He's been kind of the talk of the town just in terms of the progress that he's made. I think Ryan Grubb said that he had maybe the best spring of anybody on this roster, dating back to March and April. But then Richard Young's the guy that we kind of penciled in as the number 2 guy coming into the offseason. Like, he's waited his turn. He dealt with an injury last year. He's a guy that seems to be ready to kind of take that next step. But then you bring in a guy like Dre Washington from Louisiana, who has 4 years of college experience. I think he played 3 seasons. Like, he redshirted his first year, but then I think he's had like 64 plus carries each of the last 3 years. So a lot of intriguing options. Where does your mind kind of go, though, when you look at that running back pecking order as maybe the first guy on the field for Alabama, and then maybe the other guys where they can kind of fit in as well?
Yeah, it's tough, because I think if you asked me going into the season, if you, like, let's say 3 weeks ago, if you said Jam Miller goes down, who's going to be the first running back to take the field, I would have said Richard Young. Because, he was the number 3 guy last year behind Jam Miller and Justice Haynes.
And the shoulder issue.
Yeah, he had the shoulder issue, and he looked really good when he did play. He had the 60-ish yard run against Missouri that he broke from inside Alabama's own 5-yard line. He had a pretty good game against LSU in that blowout. He got some kind of garbage time carries. I think he ran for like 4 or 5 yards a carry, had a touchdown in that game. So he looked like the guy who's going to naturally be the backup. But asking me today, I think it would be Daniel Hill. Just based off of every bit of praise that we've heard from him dating back to the spring. And, it happened in the spring. Everyone's like, oh, cool. Daniel Hill's had a good spring. Maybe he'll, compete for some snaps. And now it seems like the first guy that's being mentioned after Jam Miller has been Daniel Hill. And he's an interesting running back because he's 245 pounds. So he's a monster of a man back there. And to have that kind of, bruiser in the backfield, I think is really interesting, and something that I don't think Alabama has had really in a while. Probably not a back that big since Najee Harris, but Daniel Hill has a little bit different of a running style compared to Najee. And so I think he would be the first guy, and then it's going to be interesting to see, after that, like you said, the pecking order and really just what it looks like from a dividing up snaps standpoint. Dre Washington's a smaller guy. He's like 5'9" or 5'10". He's like a little bowling ball. And he can catch out of the backfield. I think he had like 300 yards receiving a year ago. So that's something extra that he brings. And so, I don't know, obviously. I think Daniel Hill would be my pick. But it's going to be interesting to see where that goes from here as we lead into game week in just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing with Daniel Hill, that like all of these backs, especially these 3 you're kind of focusing on with Jam Miller out, have different skill sets. But like with Daniel Hill, one thing we've heard about him is that he's had really good hands this offseason. So like, yes, he is a big back, but like I think he can make some plays out of the backfield as a receiver. And Dre Washington, he has some home run ability. We've seen some of his clips from Louisiana. And then Rich, you're kind of rooting for Rich because he's stuck around. Last year, he dealt with the injury, but didn't get a lot of opportunities. But now is maybe the time for him. So it's fascinating. It's almost a good problem to have. You never want to lose back to injury, obviously, but then like trying to figure out how you're going to do it. It might be 33, 33, 33%. Like just split it three ways evenly. I will be fascinated to see though, like maybe does AK Deer make a move? Does he try to, work his way into this this pecking order? Kevin Riley, both of those guys did some good things in the scrimmage after talking to people. I think AK Deer had the lone rushing touchdown at the back. So it's a good room, but it's, they're without their leader right now, at least from a on the field standpoint. But speaking of on the field, we'll be back out there tomorrow, Tuesday. That's August 19th for those that need a calendar like me. And we'll have plenty of interviews this week. We'll hear from Ryan Grubb, Ken Womack, Kalen DeBoer. We'll hear from players. I think Alabama's probably going to name his captains this week too. So if you're still pissed off about that, there's something to be pissed off about this week. We'll have plenty to talk about. We'll have a quiet weekend, hopefully, and then game week will be here Monday. Just for everybody tuning in, if you've listened this long, I'll kind of spoil it a little bit. Tim Watts, Andrew Bone, and I will be on the show later this week to kind of preview the season overall. We'll probably talk a little SEC and things like that, but give Blake a little break before game week because we'll be doing this every week from here on out. But we appreciate you guys joining. If you haven't, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star rating and review. We greatly appreciate that. And if you haven't joined BOL, now's the time, man. Like we still have that $1 for your first week. So we'll have plenty of content this week. Like honestly, I'm almost overwhelmed by thinking about like the next 7 to 9 days, just what it's going to include. But you know what? That's what we signed up for. Football season's here. We'll have plenty to talk about, and we'll be talking about it at BOL, on the BOL Roundtable, and then here. So we'll see you guys, like I said, next Friday.